Before I start, let me tell you a little story. I'm very passionate to talk about women's rights, gender equality, and gender justice. Those are the issues I'm pushing strongly at the United Nations. And every time I need to deal with the question, why are you doing that? Because there are not that many men, even at the United Nations, who see this as one of the most important issues in the world. And in the beginning, I always give them the technical answer. It's about the biggest human rights violation in the world. We know that. But then I start thinking about it. Why am I a feminist? Because I'm a male feminist as well. And then I realized that if you are the dad of 3 girls, that's really easy because you want your girls to have the same opportunities of men in life. And that's it. Easy like that. Thank you very much. But I also thought about my mom. Let me tell you a story of my mom. And that's why I value women, I believe that much. My mom was not educated. She went till the 3rd grade. We lived when we came from Nigeria, we lived at Richard Fuller Straat, number 11D. That's the, very little Prasi also, all the way in the back. She did 3 jobs. She cleaned the market in the Kankantri-straat, Noordmarkt. And then she was transferred to the central market in the city, Grote Markt. And then at the end, before she retired at somebody who was sweeping the street. And ironically, she worked right in front of the presidential palace as well. So the best time in my life, the most valuable, interesting, honorable thing that happens in my life happened already. That was the day when I was standing in front of the President of Suriname in the presidential palace with my mom sitting somewhere because she was already struggling with her health, and took the oath to become an ambassador of Suriname to represent this country at the United Nations in New York. And for me, that was the most important day of my life. Just having this woman who was sweeping in front of the palace, maybe for 5-6 years before retirement, and then seeing her only son taking the oath to become representative of Suriname. So that was just a little personal story, and I think this is the right audience to share it with. I prepared a speech because I want to give you the exact numbers. I could have made slides too, but I didn't have the time since, when you're in Suriname for 2 weeks, you need to work, you need to have pleasure, you need to eat food and, do all of these beautiful things. So that's why I wrote the speech and I don't have my slides. The title of the speech is Safety and the Urgency for Women's Participation to Boost Development Sustainably. My dear friend Karin talked about, during her presentation, she talked about the Beijing Declaration 20 years ago. And let me tell you that despite the fact that 20 years ago, at the 1995 World Conference on Women in Beijing, the global community, and the global community consisted at that time of 189 countries, signed on to a plan that would incorporate greater gender equality in their penal codes by revoking any discriminatory law. Presently, there are still countries where a man can abduct a woman or girl, marry her against her will, and still be immune to prosecution. Please note also that still in this 21st century, in many countries, married women cannot get a divorce without the permission of their husbands. Violence by a husband for the purpose of correcting his wife is considered lawful in at least one country, and in some countries, a cheating wife can be legally killed by her husband or stoned to death by a decision of the courts. There are countries where sisters don't inherit as much as their brothers do. There are still countries where men can choose their women's work, and in at least one country, women may not legally drive cars. In some countries in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, to the Caribbean, marital rape is acceptable so long as the girl or the spouse is over 13 years of age. In fact, such actions are not even considered rape at all. Suriname changed this law a few years ago, so we had that law as well. This is just a small synopsis of current world affairs according to the women's advocacy group Equality Now, and their report, Ending Sex Discrimination in the Law, was released this year in 2015 in February. Yet I want to take this opportunity to talk about the real-life situation of women all over the world, no matter if they are in Paramaribo, New York, Reykjavik, Moscow, Anchorage, is everywhere the same. Women and girls need to be at the center of the global development process. Consequently, I will also talk about the reasons why the United Nations should be key in the transformation process and why everyone, and thus ordinary men and women, girls and boys, should be educated to understand that gender justice, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls are not just the right thing to do, since it's about a human rights issue, meaning to say the basic human rights of mothers, of our mothers, sisters, daughters, and other female loved ones, but also that it is a smart thing to do, since it's all about intelligent economics and the eradication of poverty worldwide. Distinguished audience, men and women live in two different security and safety worlds. With respect to violence and safety, men simply fear that women will laugh at them, while women fear that men will beat, rape, or kill them. 4 months ago, in January, Iceland and Suriname took the bold step to organize a barbershop conference at the United Nations, simply to start the critical conversation among men and to sensitize the male diplomats at the United Nations at all levels about the relevancy of gender justice and gender equality. We, the organizers, the ambassador of Iceland and myself, we knew at the outset that this step would be controversial. However, no revolution has been won by consensus. It was interesting to hear and to witness how much the men had to struggle to put themselves in positions women face daily. Let me give you a few examples. There was quite a bit of discussion regarding simple things like having to make the decision to cross the street as one walks down the road simply because a group of guys are approaching from the opposite direction, fear of being harassed, raped, or killed because of the way one decides to dress was another example. Or act like you're talking on the mobile phone at night so that one can think that you may quickly call for help if necessary, or even check the back seat of your vehicle when you enter it at night. In fact, I was very surprised the first time I was told, I think 3 years ago in my office, when a lady told me that when she entered her car at night, that she checked the back seat. And I was thinking, I don't know a man who does it. We don't do that. There's not nobody in the car, so why checking the seat? But, these are all normal, regular things women go through every day. Let me tell you this. Men in general do not fear for their safety in the same way women do. It was an eye-opener, a new experience for them, and they truly had a hard time comprehending this everyday reality of women. In the book Half the Sky by Nicholas D. Christoph and Cheryl Wooden, they wrote, in the 19th century, the central moral challenge was slavery. In the 20th century, it was the battle against totalitarianism and colonialism. And together with Suriname, many United Nations member states believe that in this century, the paramount moral challenge should be the struggle for gender equality around the world. The United Nations is currently in the final stage to craft the post-2015 development agenda, And we believe that this new global development plan should alter the lives of women and girls and actively pursue gender equality. When working to achieve dignity for all of humanity, we must ensure the respect for all human rights, including women's human rights. Until this day, women and girls are still disproportionately and systematically deprived of their rights. The pandemic of violence against women and girls is not just the biggest human rights violation, as I said before, it is also a critical barrier to sustainable development and must be addressed with the highest urgency. Men and women, girls and boys should be empowered to overcome these injustices and realize that gender equality and empowerment of women and girls benefits everybody, benefits men as well. In this vein, addressing barriers to women's leadership and participation is important to increase economic growth and the eradication of poverty. It is clear that gender equality, women's and girls' empowerment are essential towards the realization of sustainable development, and that is vital to the well-being of our societies. To be able to end poverty, the United Nations must address the persistent and growing poverty experienced by women and girls, as well as tackle structural causes of gender inequality that perpetuates its cycle. Men and women in leadership positions, but most definitely men, since at this stage there are more men than women in leadership positions, and I have it overall, politically, economically, or business. They should focus strongly on gender equality, not only to uphold women's human rights, as I said before, but also because without gender equality and women empowerment, the world community cannot dream of achieving other goals, be that poverty eradication, reduction of inequalities, or inclusive economic growth. Men should understand that when girls are allowed to educate themselves, and in that regard, I need to say that in Suriname we have a different perspective, but this is more internationally. Internationally, in some regions like Africa and Asia, girls are not allowed to educate themselves fully. But they should understand that when girls are allowed to educate themselves, women are allowed to work and empowered at all levels of this decision-making, economies grow and better health is achieved for everybody. Distinguished guests, if women paid employment rates were raised to the same level as men, the Eurozone gross domestic product would be an estimate 13% higher, and Japan would be boosted by 16%. In 15 major developing economies, per capita income would rise by 14% by 2020 and by 20% in 2030. Let me bring you back to the acceptance speech of the actress Patricia Arquette at the Oscars 3 months ago. She demanded equality in payment for men and women. Even though this comparison is a little bit distorted, since in the US film industry and Hollywood, we are talking about employment rates in the millions, while in major parts of the world, women are struggling to even be recognized as being allowed to work and to be paid. Her claim proves that this inequality between men and women is systematic and even higher. If women have had the same access as men to productive assets, agriculture output in 34 developing countries would rise by an estimate average of up to 4%. This could reduce the number of undernourished people in those countries by as much as 17%, translating it up to 150 million fewer hungry people. Women and girls should be both the beneficiaries and the drivers of the new Sustainable Development Agenda. Gender equality, the empowerment of women, and the respect for women's human rights are key as we push for the eradication of poverty and hunger, access to energy for all, or sustainable patterns of consumption and production. Women make enormous contribution to economies. whether if it is in business or science, as entrepreneurs or employees. Women and girls are also doing most of the unpaid household and care work. Healthy, educated, and empowered women and girls are crucial for a healthier planet. Fortunately, there is already a general recognition among the various United Nations member states that the post-2015 development agenda should include a strong and comprehensive goal on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, as well as integrating gender perspective throughout the entire framework. Without a strong forward-looking proclamation on gender justice, gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, half of humanity, we should understand that when I talk about this particular issue, we're talking about half of humanity. The United Nations cannot claim to have an agenda for the people of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me end my remarks with a quote from the youngest speaker at the United Nations Barbershop conference a few months ago. His name is Max Bryan. He's a 13-year-old boy from New Jersey who raised funds to send 18 girls to school for a year after he read about the story of Malala. We all know the story of Malala in Pakistan. In my opinion, Max made the most powerful statement at the conference with these words. He said, "I'm not here because I feel sorry for girls who cannot go to school. I think it is unfair that people can be denied education because they have one additional X chromosome." That's what he said. Distinguished audience, think about it. A 13-year-old boy reminded all men at the United Nations what this struggle is all about. And with this statement, I strongly believe that the transformation process has started and that men need to join with women in order to create a better world for us all. Thank you very much.